I think it's time to rock and roll. Chase, are they still pouring in?
Looks like we're going up a little bit.
Okay, Autumn. Yeah, Autumn's in control today, right? Hey, we'd like to welcome everybody. I'm Lyle Hanna with the Hanna Resource Group. We're glad you're back. We wish you didn't have to be back. Crisis Management COVID-19, a special session. Last week, we didn't plan on doing one this week, but when the CDC came out with their new announcement and the governor jumped on it and made an announcement, we started, our phones lit up. We got a lot of calls, so we thought, let's get on with it. Let's go get people together again. So Jim has been up since Friday, working on pulling stuff together. And we've been dealing with this since Thursday, writing policies for our clients. And I bet you guys have been doing the same, trying to figure out how do we communicate? What do we communicate? So we had 160 some people pre-sign up for this. So we've got 100 on board now. Let's get rolling, and I hope the rest of the folks will catch up. We're going to move pretty fast today because we've got a lot to cover. But we think we can cover this in about an hour. It may take a little longer than that, so hang with us if it does. We're going to start out with Jim just taking the reins and talking about the CDC guidance, the vaccinations, the masks guidance, and other CDC or COVID-19 restrictions. We've got some sample policies towards the end, give you some actually written. And hopefully you'll be able to move forward. But I got to tell you, we don't have all the answers. Jim is going to tell you that same thing. But don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat box. I can see some coming in already. And we'll give everybody a chance to speak before we hang up today. Anything else? Jim, did I leave anything out?
I sure hope not.
Right.
It's going to be an interesting update. We'll see what everybody thinks when I'm done. Are we ready?
I'd say let's take it away.
All right, that's me. That's what I'm going to try to cover. Lyle gave me 6 minutes, and I have 27 slides. So here we go. No, I'm joking. We're going to cover the CDC. Obviously, the CDC kind of changed everything, but the problem is with the way that it happened on a Thursday and really no pre-announcement from what I can tell, the EEOC, OSHA, Kentucky law, local law has not yet caught up. So what does that mean for everybody, and what does that mean for the businesses on the call? And that's kind of why we put this together. We were hoping to have more answers. I have a lot of questions and a lot of just being careful. I want everybody to be aware of what happens and why you need to be mindful of everything. So here we go. All right, so they did an about-face 180-degree turn because the Sunday before this announcement, they were still insisting on or suggesting double masks, didn't matter whether you were vaccinated and so on. On Thursday afternoon, we got a surprise announcement with this new guidance. I immediately got the call from Lyle saying, I think we're going to need to address this. I took a look at my Monday schedule and said, no, please, but here I am. So I did work on this all weekend. I tried to start on Friday, but the lack of any guidance really created some problems. So you all have heard the big news. I'm not going to waste a lot. Whoops, sorry. You've heard the big news. I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it. But they issued an interim public health recommendation for fully vaccinated people. Basically, there's a lot of bullets here, and I covered all of them. But the gist of all of this is you can resume everything back to normal with certain small exceptions. Now, the exceptions are going to swallow the rule. And that's where the confusion is right now and why you all have to be super careful. I don't envy anybody with a public-facing organization so that everybody understands. I'm speaking a little bit from experience because I actually had a full-blown presentation on yesterday and Saturday in Louisville to both Zoom and in-person attendees. And there was so much confusion. We had a dinner Saturday night. We had a dinner on Sunday night. We were in a hotel in Louisville on Friday to Sunday, and meetings on Saturday and Sunday in a different hotel. a lot of challenges from customers on both sides of the issue. And I watched a lot of this, and I got the questions because, hey, wait, you're the attorney and you're the one doing all these, and we've all been watching this, so let me ask you a question. So then the questions came out. Luckily, I was getting ready for this, so I had some of the answers. But the gist is this. You can resume activities if you've been fully vaccinated, inside, outside, mask, anything else. However, you do not, if there's a different rule in place locally, state-wise, or other federal regulated organizations, you have to comply with those. So let's start with the federal regulated organizations. Airlines, public transportation, taxi and Uber, anything along those lines, you still have to wear a mask. So trains, buses, airplanes, private transit through, or public transit through Uber or taxis, masks are still mandated. Why? Because nothing is caught up yet with the CDC announcement. If you've been watching us for a while, you know that I've been telling you the CDC technically does not have rules or laws. They recommend best practices. The only reason why they've taken over is because this is a worldwide pandemic. So they become the law. Everything else takes a back seat. We're about to be in a very large, nightmarish situation because the CDC has overridden the EEOC, OSHA, and all of these other protections out there. Businesses have been going on what the CDC has been suggesting. The EEOC has said, hey, look, we're in a pandemic. As long as the CDC recommends it, you can ask, for example, the HIPAA ADA asking if anybody's been vaccinated. You can ask that because we're in a pandemic and we're trying to protect the health, safety, and welfare. Well, now the CDC has said, everybody take control of your own self. If you haven't been vaccinated, wear a mask. If you have been vaccinated, you don't have to wear one. I heard this morning on a news show, they were like, well, how do we know? And the response was, well, if that person doesn't wear a mask and they haven't been vaccinated, basically the CDC is saying it's on them. We're not here as a safety net to try to protect people from themselves if they don't get vaccinated. So that we're trying to get back to people take care of yourself. Government's not going to do it. But the problem is certain people are going to start demanding vaccination cards and others are not. For example, Montana just came out with a law on Friday that protects vaccination, meaning you have a right to privacy in your own vaccination and no one can ask you if you've been vaccinated. That's Montana, and I get it, that's not where we are, but you're going to see that wave of policy going through different localities, states, and federal, and they're all going to be different, and you have to keep up with the EEOC because as soon as this is no longer a pandemic, the CDC doesn't control. So they came out with all these policies. The executive summary is basically, and they quoted it, so I'm going to quote it, fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear a mask or physically distance in any setting except where required by federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial laws, rules, and regulations, including business and workplace guidance. So, and then it says fully vaccinated people can refrain from testing following a known exposure, so you don't need to go get tested just because you were around somebody who ended up getting a positive. So what does that mean for us, and what does that mean for all of you? Just to refresh, this is all the way back in December we talked about this, but it's going to come back, and a lot of the rules that I've explained to you in the past are going to come back and bite businesses, so you need to be aware of it. So EEOC issued vaccine notifications in December. I'm short shrifting it. Remember, I had like 6 slides on this, so if you really want to know, go back and look. We did this in right before Christmas, I believe, or right after Christmas. So take a look at that. So the EEO laws are not to interfere with or prevent employers from following CDC or other federal, state, and local public health authorities' guidelines and suggestions. I put that in there because, again, this is the qualification we've all been operating under. We're dealing right now with a pandemic. Because of that, the CDC controls, not the EEOC. At some point very soon, there is no pandemic, because when you announce vaccinations are high enough that people can get back to their normal lives, and people don't have to wear a mask if they've been vaccinated, or if they want to take the risk on themselves and walk out without a mask on, we're no longer mandating this. At that point, technically speaking, this is legal suggestion, not CDC, you don't have a pandemic, because you've announced we're allowing people to get back to normal. We're allowing businesses to make their own decisions. We're allowing people to make their own conscious decisions. That, by definition, is the end of a pandemic where you're making rules based upon the better need for society versus an individual's right to freedom. So this highlighted part right here is what is changing, like, by the hour. Things are going to really start changing, and businesses are taking it upon themselves to issue brand new guidance. So the EEOC guidance, remember, it talked about administration of vaccine. It's not a medical examination. This is all critically important, because some of these handcuffs being removed are based upon vaccination. So you can administer these. It's not a medical. Pre-screening are medical, so you have to be careful about your pre-screening. That's why we recommended you send this out to a third party. You can ask for proof of receipt of the vaccine. It is not a disability-related inquiry, but asking someone, why didn't you get it? That is a potential GINA or ADA protected, so you can't get into that. If you ask pre-vaccination questions, you could be both triggering GINA protection and ADA protection, because if you say, well, do you have any health conditions that preclude you from getting the vaccine? And somebody says, yes, I have a genetic predisposition to such and such, that might trigger to you a GINA protected. If they say, yeah, I have, and there's no tie to this, so please don't go, oh, wow, I can't get it. I have diabetes, so it's been recommended I don't get the vaccine. That could trigger that the person has diabetes, and you could discriminate against them. My recommendation very heavily is employers don't get into the first-hand giving of vaccines unless you have a medical person on staff that is giving the vaccines, that is asking the questions. You put it into a red file, and management is not aware of those questions being asked. Also, remember the disability and religion. We've talked about this extensively on numerous occasions. Any religion or lack of religion, and that's the basis for them not getting the test or the vaccine, you cannot push further. You need to give any reasonable accommodations. You can exclude them from the workplace, does not mean you can fire them. You have to verify that there's no ability for them to perform their essential functions anywhere else, whether at home or giving them their own space in your facility. You still have to do all those things. This does not mean the end of all of your reasonable accommodations, especially in the state of Kentucky, and you're going to see that here in a minute. So what happens when the CDC pandemic designation goes away? We don't know yet. What happens when the EEOC compliance reverts? We don't know. When will that take place? We don't know. What time frame will employers have to build their new policies? We don't know. What immunity does an employer have for following the CDC guidelines? We don't know. What liability is going to be there? We don't know. There's a lot of questions about this, because I believe the CDC got out over their skis in making the announcement, because they didn't mesh this with EEOC, which you're seeing now, OSHA, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, the state laws, local laws, governor's executive orders, and so on. So there's a whole lot of questions out there, and you're going to see on the national companies, and we've got those listed, as to why they took the positions that they took, and some of the conservative approaches in not jumping the gun and lifting the mask mandate. So OSHA, we talked about this before. This is 3 months now in today's society, or under the pandemic, is like as old as dirt. But the last guidance issued by OSHA was January 29th. It recommended, and the reason this is critical for you is OSHA is still the law. You have a general duty. We've talked about it many times. All employers, whether employees are working from home, in a factory, or in an office setting, all employers must guarantee a safe, healthy work environment. So they then came out with their mask guidelines. This was the precursor to the emergency temporary standard and also to the enforcement enhancement policy. So they recommended, now the problem with OSHA recommendations are they are more than a recommendation, because if you don't do it and someone gets sick, you are responsible. So OSHA recommended that you provide all workers with face coverings at no cost, unless the work requires a respirator. They recommended employers require any other individuals in the workplace, visitors, customers, non-employees, to wear a face covering. And they recommended that you make vaccines available at no cost, and that they ensure vaccinated workers continue to follow protective measures. So right now you have a CDC policy that says people who've been vaccinated don't have to wear masks. So you came in today, and I'd love to see, and if I'd had time to think about this, and we'd had the ability to do a pre-meeting, we would have done a poll today that said, how many of you faced a question this morning or a comment or a grumpy worker that said, why are you still doing tests at the work site, daily screening? Why are you still requiring us to wear a mask? Because I saw the governor's tweet on the 13th, and he said that we were immediately implementing the new policies from OSHA or from CDC. Well, you can tell your people this: OSHA is the law. OSHA requires general protection of your employees, and OSHA says all employees, including those that are vaccinated, should be encouraged to continue to follow protective measures. You should require all visitors, customers, and non-employees to wear a face covering, and you shall provide at no cost face coverings and surgical masks to all employees. No other guidance has been provided since Thursday. I checked this morning. I literally checked as we were starting this up. Still nothing. So what's required and what's recommended? The other question on this, and this kind of goes back to the same, you're going to see these questions over and over. I have a recommendation for you at the end, but I just want you to understand the seriousness of this. We are under a timeline right now where it was supposed to be March 15th. The OSHA has an emergency temporary standard that they have completed for mask mandates for all businesses nationwide. They have not announced it because it's in its final review stage internally in the government, but it's finished. And they finished their meeting on May the 18th. Well, that's tomorrow. So they have until tomorrow with this meeting that's going on, where after that meeting, supposedly, the emergency temporary standard that's been promised since March the 5th, well, promised since January, since the president's executive order on January 22nd required them to issue one by March 15th. That's coming out any day, any minute, and you are required to adhere to this emergency temporary standard, which has not been used since black lung disease and asbestos. So it is a huge issue. It requires immediate compliance by all businesses affected by whatever that emergency temporary standard is. It doesn't go through any legislation. It doesn't go through an announcement time period. It is instantaneous because of the potential risk to the employees. My question is, if the CDC has declared that people who are vaccinated don't need to wear a mask, how can you come out with an emergency temporary standard nationwide for all businesses? But they have not indicated that they're going to cancel that. So you've got the emergency temporary standard coming out. You've got the enhanced enforcement policy that came out on March 15th or March 13th before the 15th deadline because they couldn't get the ETS out. Are those still in effect? When do they no longer become effective? And who's going to declare that these are not effective because the CDC has said, take your masks off if you've gotten your vaccine? All of these things are questions we don't know. So we don't know what the impact is of the new announcement on the ETS or the enhanced enforcement. And why do we need it if the masks are no longer required? And those are questions that you're going to see like dominoes in the next hours. I think today you're going to see more announcements from these organizations, tomorrow, the next day, because everyone was caught flat-footed. Every agency did not know, in my opinion, that this was coming out, because there's no way that they would not have had policies issued within 24 hours so that everything was in accordance. But OSHA's not, EEOC's not, and then we're going to get to the states. So, what does it really mean? I'm going to give you the bottom line. This is it right here. So we have a tweet that came out, and you're going to see it here in a minute. The governor tweeted on the 13th of May, the same day as CDC announcement. We are immediately implementing all of the CDC guidelines. And I'm pretty sure his staff probably cringed when he tweeted that out, because this is the policy that actually got entered by him. It's a state of emergency. It's the one I dumped in the chat box. This is a state of emergency that he actually issued. It did lift it for any person who's received the final dose of the vaccine. This is paragraph 3. At least 14 days prior is not required to wear a mask covering in any setting except as otherwise set forth in this order. Sounds great, except this order did not set aside the other policies that affect other people. And so all of you are probably sitting there going, I got an executive order, he's lifted all of this, so everything's great. No, because on Saturday he came back out and said, we're going to lift all of our mask mandates on June 11th. Now, he gave an explanation, and that explanation was that he wanted to make sure that everyone between the ages of 12 and 15 was allowed to get the vaccine with the 14 days, so he's giving it a month to work. That really doesn't work out that way, because that would have required all of those people between 12 and 15 to get vaccinated on day 1, because it's a 28-day time period, and that really didn't happen. The reason why it's taking this long is he's got other executive orders that don't expire until June 11th. So let's talk about this a little bit. Some of these are a little out of order because I actually changed slides literally like an hour ago. So you're going to see some more on the University of Kentucky, U of L, Western Kentucky University, and others here in a minute. The key points, I'm going to skip that because it's really not, I deleted one of the slides, Lyle, but somehow this one I didn't delete. So the big one is this mask mandate's going to not be gone until June 11th, which we've still got close to a month from last week's announcement. Let me get to the better ones here. So this is this morning, just so you kind of know where it is. We still have a red policy, red county policy on the CDC, or I'm sorry, on the Kentucky COVID. We still have the requirement, let me put that up there, that red county recommendations, you're still supposed to have, well, you're required to have your schools closed if you're in a red. You're still suggested to do certain things, and you've seen those on the screen, so I'm not going to go through them. If you're in one of the 3 reds, Webster, Adair, or Rockcastle, you need to be sure to be following the recommendations, especially in a school setting. So we're not out of the woods yet. There's still some issues. I'm not sure how the policies are going to mesh here, where you're allowed to be open, but red recommendations say you're supposed to be only in home. So I don't know how that's going to mesh. That's not been cleaned up yet. So this is a summary. If you remember, the governor indicated that we would not be fully open until you got to 2.7 million about a month and a half ago or a month ago. And I indicated to Lyle, I thought that we would never get there unless we opened this to children, because I think we had saturated the people who were going to get vaccinated. We are at 43% of the people vaccinated. We're at 54% of those above the age of 18. Vaccines are widely available. University of Kentucky announced, actually I think it was the state, but Commonwealth Stadium is closing down as a vaccination location because they just don't have the demand for it. So they're closing a lot of the areas because people can get these with no waiting, no registering, no anything. Your first dose notifications here, this is to show you the 12 to 17. I wish they had a 12 to 15 because 16 and 17 could get the Pfizer for the last month. I don't know how many there are, but these just became effective on Friday, where you could start to get them in the 12 to 15 age category. If you're interested in any of this, it's all on the vaccination website for KY COVID. I'll dump it into the chat if anybody wants to see it. But I wanted to show you where we kind of are. The governor announced that he was following suit. He announced the extensive change with the CDC's extensive change. He said immediate implementation. Then he issued the executive order I showed you. It modifies all previous mask mandates, but it doesn't modify the business or the school mandate. So that's where you're going to see some problems here in a minute. So I read you the first part from the paragraph 3. Any person who has received the final dose at least 14 days prior is not required to wear a mask. You still must wear a mask on all planes, buses, trains, or other forms. This is in the order itself. Any other forms of public transit. All K through 12 educational facilities must have masks from everybody that is over the age of 5. Healthcare, long-term care, correctional facilities, homeless shelters, and immunocompromised still must all wear masks. It encourages all local, county, and city government to adopt and incorporate the executive order requirements, but it does not mandate that. So you have to check all local. Right now, the local had not yet caught up. They're still trying to figure out what the state's requiring from what I can tell. As I said, this does not modify pre-existing executive orders, workplace, school, bars and restaurants, etc. So where are we? Well, here's the workplace, and this is off the policy today. Off the website today. So the healthy at work mandate still requires social distancing, facial coverings, hand washing, sanitizing, ventilation, telework where possible, common area sanitation, and daily temperature checks. Events with fewer than 1,000 or fewer, 60% capacity. More than 1,000, 50% capacity. That is still in existence as of this morning. So what does that mean? All right, with all of the confusing tweets, conflicting tweets, declarations, executive orders, and so on, you still must wear a mask. This is my high recommendation to everyone. You must wear a mask indoors at any public facilities, outdoors with crowds more than 1,000. Healthy at work has not been amended. Healthy at school has not been amended. The current executive order does not address restaurant and bar limitations. So what that means is until May 28th, all bars and restaurants are still required to abide by a curfew. There is still no bar seating, and capacity is limited to 60%. I've seen some open in the bars. I've seen some open with no space considerations. I believe they're jumping the gun. I don't know what the enforcement's going to be, but the rules right now are the rules, and they're still in existence. After May 28th and until June 11th, there will be no curfew. The bar seating will be allowed. Capacity is lifted to 75%, but masks are still required. Now, I understand that there's a lot of, like I said, I was in Louisville. The restaurant I went to, no way that it was at 60% capacity. It was at 100% capacity, but they had mask mandates everywhere. Everybody had to wear them if you were away from your seat. But then the hotel, we still had social distancing. We still had everybody at separate tables, classroom settings, separate tables, 6 feet apart. We had to wipe down and sanitize. We couldn't hand the microphone around. It was very confusing, and it's going to be until June 11th. Until May 28th, venues with more than 1,000 people, you're limited to 50%. After May 28th until June 11th, more than 50% people more than 1,000 people can increase to 60% capacity. On June 11th, if nothing changes between now and then nearly all of the mask mandates will be lifted. Until then, this is kind of your Bible. This is where we are. Why do I say that? Well, because if you look at the mask mandate, let me pull it up there for you. This is the Healthy at Work. This is it, April 19th. It is still the policy according to Team Kentucky on the KY COVID, which is where they told you all you had to look. This is your Healthy at Work. This is your face covering one that I just showed you. But when you click on the minimum requirements for all businesses to run your organization, this is your policy. You cannot avoid it because the mask mandate did not set this aside for businesses. It set it aside for all individuals who are required to wear masks, but it did not set aside the business requirement to adhere to the other policies. So, what is the impact? It's a little confusing. It's a little difficult to give you guidance, but I want to tell you what everyone else is doing. This is what I've been able to find. UK announced as soon as that policy was in place, they're going back to a standard no longer remote working unless you have other reasons on July 1st. U of L and Western Kentucky announced immediate lifting of the mask mandate for anybody who has been vaccinated for people on campus. UK said we're still trying to review where we are. I'm going to get into detail about each one of these, but I'm just kind of giving you a heads up. Costco, Publix, Sam's Club, Simon, which owns malls throughout the United States, Trader Joe's and Walmart, they're all no longer requiring masks for vaccinated customers, period. Starbucks is now optional for vaccinated customers beginning Monday, unless local regulations require them by law. You notice I have that italicized. We'll address why in a little bit. Target, CVS, Macy's, and Walgreens, they're still evaluating the CDC guidelines, but then they went on a little bit further and explained themselves, and I'm going to cover those on individual policies for you to consider. Problem for Kentucky establishments, we've kind of talked about this. The confusion between the Healthy at Work orders, the mask order, and other state-by-state requirements for national companies have created a tremendous amount of confusion. So Costco, I went ahead and put it in here. You all can see this. If you have multiple business or locations in different states, basically what they did is they said, if you're in a location with no state or local mask requirement, here's our new policy. And they basically are saying, you make your own decision. It's up to you. If you're in a state that requires it, we have no policy change. So what this is requiring is everyone needs to pull up your locality of any business location where you are, Lexington, Louisville, Bowling Green, anywhere else, Pikeville, Northern Kentucky, wherever you are, you need to pull up your local. But right now you have to adhere to the state. And until our state Healthy at Work is lifted, until our state Healthy at School is lifted or modified, you have to comply with the Healthy at School, you have to comply with the Healthy at Work, and so these individual mask liftings do nothing. So stay tuned on that. Walmart came out. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because it's the incentive. I've been asked about incentivizing. I wanted to explain this a little bit so that you kind of know where they are. They're offering $75 to all field associates. Why is that important? Walmart has a lot more money to spend on attorneys than anybody on this call. So if Walmart has decided that $75 is a decent amount to land on, despite the new administration's suggestion that you can't incentivize vaccines or else it could be discriminating against those that don't get the vaccine, $75 is probably a decent amount to consider. You'll see here in a minute, I think it's Meyer that offered 100. You could do that as well. Actually, it might be Home Depot. We'll get to that. So the
Over.
incentivized, they talked about how to do the incentives. That's something that you could pull up and copy. It's on their corporate website. And I've got that. I'm going to dump it in the chat right now because I happen to have it on the screen. So if you want to see how Walmart handled it with their team of thousands of attorneys before their corporate policy came out, take a look at it, because why reinvent the wheel? They've done a good job of it themselves. They put it out there for all their people to see so you can look at it. I'm not telling you to plagiarize, but hey. They also then talked about the mask mandates. So what they've done is they lifted starting tomorrow that fully vaccinated associates will not need to wear a mask. They defined what that was. People who have had 2 weeks since their final dose, whether it's a 1 dose or a 2 dose, it applies nationwide. Unvaccinated still have to wear it, and they're still reviewing whether masks will be required in certain job areas. So you can kind of look at that and figure out for yourself how to build that. Then they talked about their customer base and announced as of last Friday, vaccinated customers and members are welcome to shop without a mask. But then they put in the caveat that everybody has had to comply with, which is, yeah, you still have to wear them depending on city and state ordinances. So they're still doing that. Interesting thing about Walmart, and we put that on our blog because the day that, I want to say it was like a month ago, my son walked into a Walmart and he took a picture. I won't tell you which one it was, but they literally announced that masks were not required. It was suggested but not required. And I told him how crazy that was because we still had the indoor mandate, the one I just showed you, for all businesses, and yet Walmart was putting out at their front entrance, feel free not to wear one, we suggest that you do. And I said, just wait for it because we'll see how long that, I haven't checked to see whether it's still up, but I guarantee you that they probably got smacked down by somebody because it's still state law to wear a mask inside. So I was really surprised to see that at a local Walmart in Kentucky. It showed me that somebody jumped the gun at the local level without getting guidance from their attorney, or their attorney didn't bother to realize Kentucky had not lifted the indoor mask mandate. So just a little interesting thing. Disney World, all located in Orange County, Florida. This is not Disneyland, located in Anaheim, California. Because Disney World is located in one location, and because Orange County had lifted the outdoor mask requirement altogether, Disney World followed suit. You can go there and look at their guidelines. I screenshotted this from their website. They are still requiring masks inside, and for all cast members, bring your own, wear them to all indoor locations, but you no longer have to wear them outside. So that's kind of how Disney was handling it. I know that doesn't apply to you, but that made big news because that's the first outdoor venue to say you don't have to wear them outside. Kroger, Home Depot, and Meijer, what did they do? Because they're local, national, regional. So this is important for you to realize because this is kind of showing you the breaks and how people are going, whoa, slow down, slow down. So Kroger came out on Friday with an official press release. At this time, the Kroger family of companies continues to require everyone in our stores to wear masks. As we have throughout the pandemic, we are reviewing current safety practices, CDC guidance, and soliciting feedback from associates to guide the next phase. Kroger is the one, I thought it was Home Depot. Kroger is offering a one-time $100 payment to employees who choose to get vaccinated. Following suit, Meijer came out on the same day and said, while we are aware of the new guidance, many state or local orders in the Meijer footprint remain in effect regarding masks. In order to help ensure the continued health and safety of all of its team members and customers, and this is my editorial comment, and also to avoid threatening behavior from customers and irate people being rude based upon individual locality rules, Meijer continues to require face coverings by anyone entering a Meijer store. Likewise, Home Depot announced on Friday its stores would also continue to require masks. Many national organizations appear to be taking a wait-and-see approach, or else, and this is more realistic, their legal departments were caught off guard. It takes a while with most legal departments, general counsels with their teams of attorneys. It takes them a long time unless they prepared beforehand. I guarantee you some of these, i.e., going backwards, Disney World, Walmart, Costco, Publix, Sam's Club, Simon, Trader Joe's, Starbucks, all of those organizations, guaranteed they had their people, their legal departments working on an announcement so that day one they could jump on it, make their announcement, and get it out there so that they could placate all of their customers that are so furious about wearing masks. These others probably did not realize how quickly the CDC would announce it, so they've come out with a non-policy. We're going to just continue this. I think some people just want to lay back and not scare people. So this is kind of the recommendation that we've put out here for you to just kind of be thinking of. So with all the confusion, all of the announcements, the tweet, the backtracking, the new policies, mask mandate being lifted, but then the individual's not, what should you do? You need to check all state and local, wherever you're located, because CDC is not binding authority at all. All they do is give health care concerns. They do not give legal recommendations. For Kentucky-based, this means you still require masks for indoor, social distancing, and 60% capacity. Check your local ordinances for any additional based upon your individual locations, every single one of them, whether this is Winchester or whether this is Pikeville, Ashland, anywhere where you're located, make darn sure you're in compliance. OSHA has not come out with new guidance. Its current policy recommends that everyone wear those. So although it's several months old, and although there's supposed to be a temporary emergency standard, you need to be aware that that's still the case, and you need to be ready to jump on that. You also need to determine whether the removal of masks and physical distancing, will negatively impact your customers. You all know your individual customers, so the question that you need to ask is this: how will your customers react to your lifting of the masks? I will tell you, at the meeting I had on Saturday and Sunday, there was an individual who showed up. There was one table of people at one round table, socially distant. They had taken their masks off. They thought they were allowed to have their masks off because the governor tweeted out and said, we are immediately implementing the CDC. CDC says we can do it. We've all been vaccinated. We all know each other. We don't want to wear masks. Someone came in and saw that and reported to the person that's running the meeting that there are people non-compliant over there and you need to tell them to put their masks on or leave. It put the organizer at a very uncomfortable position. So you need to figure out your customer base and figure out whether they are going to be negatively impacted. Are you going to lose customers by not having the mask? Are you going to lose customers by forcing the mask? Right now, I would make the state and the federal the bad guy. It's easy because OSHA, make them the bad guy. I'm sorry. We must continue to require masks because OSHA has told us we have to continue to protect our employees. Well, what about CDC? Well, Jim Morris said, CDC is not the law, OSHA is, and we have a general requirement, and OSHA is still forcing us to do this. And, oh, by the way, the governor still requires us to do it. All indoor facilities until June 11th must continue to comply with the mask mandate. That's the current policy. If you want to break that, I will tell you, I would seriously doubt that you're going to face any enforcement policies once that tweet came out. I think the tweet's going to create a lot of confusion, a lot of inability to enforce it, but by the letter of the law, you're still required to do this. You also need to then determine, you know, the ramifications of a vaccination policy. We haven't talked about this today as much because we talked about it before, but are you going to require every employee to give you a vaccination card? What happens if they don't? Are you going to force them to wear a mask, or are you going to give them social distancing in their own location? At what point does that become unfair to everybody else that John Smith has their own office simply because they won't get vaccinated and everyone else is crammed into the, 20 people to a room because we've all been vaccinated? You need to be very careful about those pitfalls. Enforcement policies. Is it going to become, are people going to be protected status because of their vaccination status? It is in Montana. Be aware of it everywhere else. Also, you need to create a formal policy. Whatever you're doing, you need to have a well-established policy in writing, and you need to document that in accordance with ADA, EEOC, CDC, state law, local law, everything. Make sure you're documenting exactly why you're doing what you're doing. Finally, I've warned you about unionization and union efforts. You need to make darn sure in the case of a union or potential union that you consider the union's collective bargaining agreement and what mask mandates will do. By way of example, like the shopping centers, Kroger, Meijer, Walmart, the unions that run some of those baggers and grocery store workers unions, they've come out with a stated policy that they want to force masks regardless of what the CDC has done. So Kroger right now and Meijer are taking the approach of, we've got unions involved and we have to go through our collective bargaining agreement. We've got a union steward that has come in with a stated policy that they want masks to continue so that they can protect their employees. Quite frankly, I was a little surprised with Walmart how quickly they came out, because they've got their own issues with potential union and so on. However, I will readily acknowledge that I believe that the Meijer and Kroger, knowing where they're located and knowing their unionization efforts, that's largely a lot of the reason. They won't say that to their general public, but that's a lot of the reason why they went on the we haven't made a decision yet, because they have to reach out to their various unions and say, hey, what's your approach? How do you feel about a mask? What should we do? And then once they've gotten that guidance from the union, they can build their policy, because they have to protect their employees. They have to adhere to their union, and then they can issue their new policies. So you're going to see those things come out. You may see some of those change, but we want to share with you where that was. And so that's the general legal update. Lyle, it's back to you, unless we're going to answer questions first.
Let's see what questions we have. I know.
So I'm going through here. We had a couple of questions that were submitted before the session, but I think you've answered them in going over if someone refuses to get the vaccine, can they be forced to wear a mask?
Right, and I did get a private message, and I'm just going to share it with everyone. It said employers need to determine whether removal of masks and physical distancing will negatively impact their own employees' health and welfare too. Potential conflicts with customers as well. And I think I kind of covered that, because you are going to face, customers have a right to go without masks if you want them to. They don't have a right, I'm sorry. You may want to have customers not have to wear masks because they're more comfortable that way, but then you have an OSHA requirement to protect your health, safety, and welfare of your own employees. And until OSHA tells you that it's safe for your employees, you're running a risk, because your employees could then sue you or file for workers' comp or OSHA violations because you didn't adhere to the general policy. That's why I've been saying for a year, if and when the pandemic is over, there's going to be a vacuum, and I think you're seeing the beginning of that vacuum, where policies don't match and requirements don't mesh with one another, you're going to see a whole lot of really big confusion things because customers are going to get angry. There was a story, I didn't put it in here because I don't want to scare you all, but I'm going to scare you. There was a Target security guard that had a broken arm in California because they were trying to enforce a mask mandate, and a customer got violent with the security guard. There was a fatal shooting at I don't want to misstate which location and where, but it was somewhere out in the Midwest or West where there was a fatal shooting of someone over policies and enforcement of those policies. That's why I said that I truly believe that someone jumped the gun or that there wasn't a meeting of the minds among the different agencies, because it really was critically important, which is why Lyle called me on Thursday, and I was in a meeting, and he called me like 3 times and was like, can you do this on Monday? Because we're getting inundated. What do we do? And I looked at it as soon as it came out and as soon as I got done with my call, and I was like, this is a nightmare, because businesses, especially customer-facing businesses, and really anybody who has in-person employees, you're going to get faced, like I said, I wish that I had thought about a poll. How many of you this morning got the person walking in without a mask that said, I saw the tweet on Friday, we don't have to wear masks anymore, I'm not going to stop for my temperature check, I just want to go to work. Well, the reality is those people still, you as an employer, still have to comply with your healthy at work, even though they as an individual don't have to wear their masks and they don't have to comply with it. And so you've got to educate, and that's the key here, and that's where I'm going to segue beautifully into what Lyle has to say here about samples. You need to, and I don't know whether the sample that he's got here, I'm not trying to jump you forward here and kill your slides or anything, Lyle, but I will say, I'm not sure you can use this yet in the state of Kentucky. And I know Lyle understands that because we talked about this and the confusion that we have. But as soon as, which could come today, once the governor, and we're going to reach out to his people that we've been talking to see if we can fix this. Once we reach out to them, maybe the healthy at work mandate gets lifted. Maybe some of these others get lifted and we can get this cleaned up. But until then, be aware that you are there, you're in that vacuum. And this is a small part of it. Once this gets really going and OSHA starts changing theirs, but the EEOC hasn't caught up, or vice versa, and once the governor's done it, but OSHA hasn't, or the governor hasn't, but OSHA has, you're going to see so many policies that are going to be confusing that even though we've told you we're going bi-weekly and we're going to try to do this so that you're not inundated, you're going to see these special sessions, because this is just the beginning of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, of how many things we're going to be dealing with and how precarious you are as an HR professional, a business owner, or anything with customer-facing, employee-facing, aggressiveness from customers and employees about how awful things are and why aren't you following the brand new policies. It's going to be confusing, and that's why I agreed, even with everything going on today that I have and everything all weekend. Today, out of all of the days, and I know that I don't have all the answers, but I think today was the critical day that you all needed guidance as quickly as possible, because you're facing CDC telling you, hey, nobody wear masks. OSHA saying, everybody wear masks. And EEOC going, because the CDC controls, you can inquire of everybody why they're not wearing masks. You can enforce your masks and you can enforce your vaccinations, and they haven't caught up with one another. So welcome to the Twilight Zone. That's where we are. And I'll answer some of these in the chat session. And I'll let Lyle go through with his, and then we'll get back to general
And I
questions.
just have a couple of slides, and they actually,
Whoops,
Chip
sorry.
Barton, that's okay, we're good.
There you go.
Chip Barton works with us, and he already published the entire document in the chat box. But I thought we had to come up with something on Thursday night for an organization. And so this is what we came up with, and it has some problems, but we thought it was really good at spur of the moment. And I think as you're starting to do this, it's always nice to have there's that old saying, remember why the good Lord made your eyes, don't shade your eyes, but plagiarize. I don't know where that came from. That was Tom Lear. He's a Harvard professor that years ago, but here's one that's a good example for you. And it's not exactly, it doesn't perfectly work right now, but we think it will work. Our COVID mask policy will now be optional for employees who are fully vaccinated and who choose to provide proof of vaccination. This change is to be effective Monday, May 17th. Masks continue to be required for those who are not vaccinated and those who prefer not to disclose their vaccination status. So employees can choose to provide the documentation, which is the card or other things, statements from Walgreens or pharmacy or your doctor. And but don't provide any other medical information. So it's just one way to get at it. It's not perfect, but it gives you some wording that you might use if you're doing something. And I thought, I don't know if you all read the New York Times, but I was reading it this morning. And go to that next slide, Jim. Just as a way to kind of wrap up. I think there's another slide in there, isn't there? There you go. So, we've had Dr. Mark Doherty on here in the past, and he's the head of immunology for the Baptist Health Group. He's got his own practice in town with, I think, 23 different doctors that work on this. He's the guy, he and a guy in Houston are the two people that pioneered the other way of, helping take care of COVID through the anyway, he's really out in front of everything, and he says, get the darn vaccine. One thing immunologist, yeah, but one of the things he says is, if some people want to say, oh, the vaccine is this new thing and it's dangerous, and it is up for final approval now for the Pfizer vaccine, but he said, no, we've been using this process to develop vaccines for 10 years. We knew exactly what we were doing. Once we understood, what the virus was, we knew we could come up with a way to, adjust it. So that's what he said, it's worth doing. He said, but here's what the head of the CDC said today in the New York Times. There's no better way to crush the pandemic in coming weeks than to persuade vaccine skepticals to get the shot. It's the best way for them to protect themselves from the risk of COVID, hospitalization, and death. If you're not vaccinated, you're not safe. And, my best friend's an immunologist at UK, teaches at UK Medical Center, and he'd say the negatives on it are so minor compared to the positives, you ought to really consider it. So, and it's funny, these incentives that are going around, the governor's office actually called us and asked us to encourage you all to provide incentives. And we haven't really done that, but I hear there's a tie to the Kentucky lottery, $250,000 winnings, and we don't know exactly how it's going to work, but it's going to be announced shortly. And there's something in Ohio, it's $1 million one. I guess it only applies to people who haven't had the vaccine yet, but if you get the vaccine, you go in a lottery. And so anyway, a lot of wild stuff going on. So we're going to keep our nose to the ground and kind of watch for things for you. Have we gotten any more questions?
I'm trying to answer them, but there are so many. Allison, if you want to ask them, I know you sent me a few. If I can't answer them, I'll say next. How about that?
What about laminating your vaccine card? Somebody else.
I just answered that one. Yeah, don't laminate your card because they're suggesting there may be booster shots in the future that you'll need to add to that card, and if you get it laminated, you won't be able to add it. So that's been an issue. And the
Okay.
question from Mary about can't this create a hostile environment for those that don't get vaccinated? Absolutely. And that's what we've been preaching about with regard to even the incentives of if you pay somebody too much to get vaccinated, then you're discriminating against those that don't. If you have a pizza party for those that get vaccinated and you preclude those that don't, are you discriminating against those? You're going to see a lot of that happening. And Kentucky passed a statute that protected people from vaccinations if they have a closely held belief. So you have to be very careful of that. And this is the beginning of the vacuum where you're going to see, and that's why when I saw this on Thursday from the CDC, my initial reaction was, how are you going to police this? And if you start requiring vaccination cards, then we've become exactly what we're not allowed to be, which is enforcing or forcing vaccinations on people who are not willing or not able to get it and discriminating against those that do. And it's going to create a lot of issues. And this gets back to you cannot have a national mandate. You can't have a national mask requirement. You can't have a national vaccine requirement. And you've heard me talk about that back during the election campaign. And I said there's no way one of the candidates, the president now, indicated we're going to have a mask mandate. And I said you can't. Only governors can enforce a mask mandate. Our Constitution does not allow a national, universal mandate. Only certain small things, and it must be passed by Congress, not by the president. So you're about to see, and as somebody who flew nonstop 200 times a year before the pandemic, one of the things I've been wondering is how are the airlines going to handle this? Because I think the FAA is going to come out with a vaccination designation in my profile that will show whether or not I've been vaccinated. And then I'll be able to show that to the airline flight attendants and go, no, I don't have to wear my mask. But until they come up with that, then you're going to have people with basically a red letter where if you've been vaccinated, you don't have the scarlet A, but if you haven't been, then you're going to have this big scarlet A that says, oh, that person's not been vaccinated. And that's not what we're allowed to do, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to get undone.
Yeah.
That's why I said there's a lot of policy issues that were not addressed at the same time that really probably should have been. So have at it with Allison. Tell me what you have there, because I'm seeing policy or comments coming in quicker than I can answer them.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions that are similar, so I'm going to combine them. Our company is proposing to not have anyone wear a mask, whether they are vaccinated or not, because they don't want to ask who is vaccinated. Would it make sense for this company or some companies to just wait to implement the no mask policy until after June 11th?
I would not, under any circumstance, insist on no masks right now, number one, because if you're in the state of Kentucky, which I'm assuming you're under a state policy to have them. Number two, I would be very hesitant to require no masks at any point right now, simply because it's not up to the employer for the comfort level of the employee. And if you have employees that are insisting on wanting to wear a mask, I would not wear one right now. I'm sorry, I would not require them to not wear one right now.
Got it. And does it become a legal risk or even count as discrimination if we put accountability to an employee that refuses to wear the mask and isn't vaccinated?
So see, that's where I put a comment in the chat. You're about to see, you're going to see domino effects here, and you're going to see a vacuum, like I said, and I know it's going to sound overused, but this is another example. So what is the workers' comp implication of an employee who, I'm going to use the one that's alive first, and then we'll get to the one that she just mentioned. What if you establish a policy that says, hey, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, like Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club. So they've done this announcement, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. What if the employee says, I've been vaccinated? Well, can we see the proof of that? No, you know what? I like my privacy. I'm in the state of Montana. I'm not going to tell you, but I'm not going to show you, but I have been vaccinated. Well, okay, then if you've been vaccinated, feel free, take your mask off. Then a person contracts COVID at work. What's your liability as an employer? That person lied to you, but there's no liar, pants on fire immunity to workers' comp. It is all or nothing. It applies across the board. Doesn't matter whether the employee accidentally got sick or not. If you have a workers' comp that covers it, it's covered. Then what about Allison's, or the suggestion she just read? So this person is told, you have not been vaccinated, you must wear a mask. And they go, no, I'm just not going to do it. I don't think I need one. What is your liability? Again, there is no, well, right now, OSHA says you should require masks, so you can still require it. What if you don't? What if you don't require masks and the person gets sick, but they did it because they themselves didn't wear the mask and didn't get vaccinated? Or what if you told them they had to and they said no? I think you're still going to get hit with workers' comp. I don't know that you'll get hit with liability if you have set forth your policy. But again, I'm not trying to drum up business here for anybody, but you need a very well-defined policy. And you need to set out one that covers all of the legal aspects. Why? Because if that person or an attorney, plaintiff's attorney, can punch a hole through your policy, you can be held liable because you didn't have a well-established policy that addressed that particular scenario. You're in risky times right now.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, put up the last slide. I just put the codes in the chat box, but that'll help too if you do that. If people want to copy them, they're in the chat box.
Okay, so one of the earlier slides said those vaccinated do not need to test after an exposure. Do we know, are they still supposed to quarantine? Has any of that changed?
No, they do not have to quarantine either. Unless, if they are asymptomatic, you do not have to, and I think it was on that slide. I don't want to jump back there to it. I didn't read it out loud, but that slide said you also don't have to self-quarantine.
It's on there.
Okay, great. And then we had a private question that says, would riding in a vehicle with another person be considered an indoor activity requiring a mask in Kentucky, even if all are vaccinated?
So if it's public transportation like an Uber, the answer is yes. Right now, every public transportation, taxi, Uber, Lyft, bus, and so on, you have to. Anything else right now, if it's work related, then you have to comply with your work policy, and the work policy is a healthy at work. Everyone must be masked. Now, will someone pull you over because two people are in a car not masked? No. Quite frankly, I have seen people in a mask, and outside of a Lyft situation, I've seen people in a car together, and I've often sat there and wondered, why are they wearing a mask? Unless they're at work and they're following their mask policy, then it makes sense. But yes, you're in that situation where if you are working, you have to comply with the work policies, and the work policies are everyone must be masked if you're within 6 feet of one another and you can't social distance.
Okay, as a follow-up, I got if the windows are open, would that change the requirement?
Then it's not a.
So the answer to that is, how big is your car? If somebody's in the back seat, now you know what. This goes back to, and it was a brilliant comment because I agreed with it. So this was not a negative, but at one point we had the silly requirement of it wasn't 60% of capacity; it was 60% of your workforce. And one astute commentator on this, one listener made a comment of if there's only two of us, does that mean that neither of us can ever show up to work? And I said, I know, and that's the silliness of having it be 60% of your workforce instead of 60% of your physical capacity of your building. And then they finally changed it only like 3 weeks ago. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Windows down, windows up, in a car or not, I seriously doubt you're going to get pulled over by the police for not having a mask on. But for your employer, could you get a workers' comp out of it? And I know that it sounds silly, we're wearing a mask, what if we have the windows down? But the employer's worried about liability. And so could you get hit with a lawsuit? And then one of the things was, well, does workers' comp really cover this? If you're an employer, you hope it does. Now, there was a private comment, is workers' comp may exclude certain communicable diseases. It may. As an employer, you hope that's their exclusive remedy, because why? Then you get hit with a lawsuit for exposing your employees to a known issue, and now you have to defend against a personal liability claim, personal injury claim. I will tell you, I didn't put the slide in because it didn't go with our emergency special session, but there was a brand new federal lawsuit that dismissed a wife's claim, a spouse's claim, against the husband's employer for the husband getting COVID and dying from COVID, and she sued the employer trying to get damages, and the government came in, the court came in, brand new case, and dismissed it. It's not in our jurisdiction. It doesn't necessarily affect us, but you're going to see those lawsuits coming out. So for all those people who are like, well, I hope that our workers' comp doesn't go up because of COVID, you probably are going to wish and hope that COVID was a covered workers' comp claim so that you don't have to face personal injury lawsuits, because they're going to come out of the woodwork until this gets addressed. So anything else anybody wants to cover, throw it at me if it's out there. I tried to cover everything I could. I know I didn't get to everything, but this was a crazy weekend trying to keep up with all of this.
We had I'm not sure if this is really a question for you or just a suggestion to share, but someone said maybe instead of requiring them to provide a proof of vaccination, we just have them sign something stating that they certify they meet the requirements set by the company for vaccine or requirements set by the company for being vaccinated and accept all responsibility for opting not to wear a mask.
Yeah, you can do that. That's where you need to have a well-established policy on that as well, because if you're asking inquiries that could lead to customer or employee additional information, you may need to put in that same questionnaire. If not, do you require any reasonable accommodations? Because remember, you're required to provide reasonable accommodations and non-COVID related guidance here. Just remember, it's your obligation to be proactive with those reasonable accommodations. You cannot sit back and wait for the employee to tell you, hey boss, I need a reasonable accommodation. You have an affirmative duty to inquire of your employees as to whether they need it and to walk through with them what possible accommodations you can give them. When that's getting outside of typical COVID, that's getting back to your standard ADA and reasonable accommodations, and the fact that you are required under federal law to be proactive and provide to them any accommodations required. So I took slides off so you guys can chat and I can continue to address questions. I just want you all to know this has been it's been an interesting weekend, because I really was hoping to get more guidance to you, and instead I have a lot more questions and a lot less guidance. I'm sorry, I tried.
We got one more that just came in that says, does Senate Bill 5 give liability protections to businesses?
It does, but I don't know how that's going to impact employees. Honestly, that hasn't been fleshed out enough to determine, is that customer facing only, customer and employee? And I'd have to go back and look at the exact text of that. But the intent, I will tell you the intent of that statute of the Senate Bill 5 was to provide guidance as long as you're adhering to policies and procedures that are out there. Remember that the governor challenged some of these policies. It's up in front of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's waiting on briefing. Some of those could be shot down as unconstitutional. It's still kind of out in the open. I mean, out in the wild, wild west because of the challenges back and forth. It would have been cleaner if these weren't vetoed, overridden, and challenged. But yes, the intent of Senate Bill 5 and several others was to provide employers and businesses with protections if they're doing their best. But in this vacuum, the problem is plaintiff's attorneys can point to one statute and say, but you were still, for example, you were still required to do a mask mandate and you didn't do it. And then the employer's going, but wait, the CDC said I didn't have to have masks. Which one? And the governor said that individuals didn't have to have masks. So which one do we comply with? So during a time when there is conflicting statutory and executive order laws, I don't know how far that immunity will fly with the fact that people can point to different ones.
All right. I think that's all that we have at the moment.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that there are a lot of other hot issues, and we plan on covering those in the coming sessions. DE&I is a hot one for everybody. If there wasn't for COVID, that would be just a huge issue. It is anyway, but we're going to deal with it. And how about?
I was going to talk about drugs.
I was going to say marijuana. The marijuana thing is getting to be a big issue. People
we were gonna have fun with some of these things. I don't mean fun. I mean, but we were going to be talking about some of the hot button issues, and this one was unexpected. But with the number of people that I saw on here and the number of questions, Lyle, kudos to you for suggesting we do it, and to your team for putting it together. On short notice, I think it's critical to get the information out when we need to. And we may need to do another one before the standard schedule that we were going to put out there. I just want you all to know that as we see the need to do these, we will jump in here and try to do the best we can. We are trying to get you the information as quickly as possible. I hope you all appreciate it.
Got it. Allison, when was our next?
We'll follow up via email because I think we've got to internally decide that first.
Okay. All right. I know.
Yeah, we were skipping all the way until
June 7th.
Actually, no, we were going to do one next week, but now we may not because we may not need to. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and we don't know which one we're going to do because we don't know how much is going to happen between now and then.
Yeah. So we'll keep a handle on things. Thank you so much to so many of you for joining us. We hope you have a great day and a good week. And don't hesitate to fire off questions to us if you come upon something you need help with. That's the scoop. Anybody want to speak up?
Now's the time.
Sonia Osmond, are you on here? I know you are. I see you there. All right.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
I am. Hey.
Hey, just want to say hi. Glad you made it.
Yes, I'm traveling, so I'm in and out.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. I love looking at those list of names. I've got friends on here from out west, from all over. It's just fun.
Well, this was good work, guys.
Okay. Hang in there.
Oh, John Anderson's on, but he's muted. Hold on.
Hey, has there been any discussion of Kentucky ending the extended unemployment benefits before September, such as Tennessee?
No, because the issue that you're going to run into is the Republican-controlled Senate and House are no longer in session.
Correct.
And from what I've understood, the governor intends to continue this as long as it's available. So you won't have any ability for legislative effort until September, October, and I'm sorry, until December or January. This is done on September 30th. The other issue that you have, so that this is not a political statement, this is a question I'm not sure the answer to. I don't know that the governor can lift by executive order without legislative involvement. So even if he wanted to, I'm not positive that he has the authority. And I will say this, there are 16 states that right now have said they will not accept the federal monies any longer. Bernie Sanders came out with he's trying to insist and to get the federal government to sanction those states because he believes that the federal unemployment is mandatory and that states cannot accept out of it. So now you're seeing, even with those 16 states, you've got a U.S. senator that's going to challenge those 16 states that they cannot bar people from getting unemployment. So the answer, long and short, is, and I almost put a slide out there on that too, but that wasn't the urgency of what we're dealing with. I don't see Kentucky undoing it because I think there's enough confusion about his executive orders and whether they would be effective, especially since the Senate said, or the House and Senate legislative said, it's only effective for 30 days. I don't know that he has authority to do anything. And even if he did, I don't know that we've heard enough from him that he would be willing to set it aside. And then, of course, you've got the federal side where you've got Bernie Sanders challenging the states. I just don't see us getting into the middle of that. Almost every state that has declared abandonment of that is a Republican governor-controlled state. So I just don't see Governor Beshear following that, and especially with the challenges, I just don't think he wants to get in the middle of it.
I appreciate your comments.
Anything else?
All right.
Anybody else want to throw out there? I'll answer any other questions. You can chime in and I'll try to answer them.
All right. Some nice comments. And it's fun to catch